So after Oklahoma State's pretty bad weekend at home and Iowa State's great weekend on the road, I posted this on Twitter. Also, follow me on Twitter if you haven't already for channel updates and my thoughts on wrestling news here and there. Just follow me on Twitter. But regardless, this tweet has some backstory to it. So coming into this monster weekend of college wrestling, I realized some of the best teams in duels were competing against each other. We obviously had the monster matchup between Penn State versus Iowa, number 1 versus number 2. And then Oklahoma State had unranked but very tough UNI and a really good Iowa State team led by Kevin Dresser. So what I did was I pulled out my notes and made a note card with my top 10 duel teams. Insert terrible handwritten note card here. You can tear me apart in the comment section below with my terrible handwriting, and I'm sure there's a ton of people who disagree with my top 10 list, but let me explain the point of this video first, and then you can tear me apart. For years, people have wanted a dual national tournament back like the good old days, with all the best teams battling it out, and also adding an individual national tournament on top of that. Slowly over the years though, all the focus has been moved towards individual titles in March, which is respectable, that is for all the marbles, and the idea of a dual national championship has slowly been demolished. However, I thought it would be fun to make a dual tournament, or let's say a playoff, in an alternate reality, that all the marbles were collected in the dual college playoff, ran exactly like college football. Top 4 teams get in, and then there is bowl criteria after that. This would be legendary, and I think it would be really awesome for the sport, but I won't hold my breath on it. But we can still have fun and speculate on it for sure. So that terrible note card was me putting myself in the mind of a college football playoff ranker. And I went back and took notes on how losses or certain wins affected rankings in football, because that was my main starting point, and then applying it to NCAA wrestling. The biggest thing you all need to know is that this is only based on dual results, and if they win or lose, it does not matter who is in the lineup that day, it is marked the same way. Just put yourself in the mind of a football season. If a quarterback is out for Alabama, or any football team for that matter, they will either get smoked because of it, or they're still coming out winners. Regardless, a W is a W and an L is an L. It does not matter who was in that day. So with all of that out of the way, I'm sure people are wondering what my rankings will be for this week, especially with several upsets and dramatics throughout the wrestling landscape. Well, let's talk about it. Also, if you want these rankings every week in video format or just on Twitter, please let me know and I will be happy to do it for you guys. Before that though, be sure to subscribe to TrueTan Wrestling. My name is Tanner, by the way, and I make content about my favorite sport, Division I college wrestling. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and that subscribe button for more content in the future. Also, I make more content on Patreon, so if you really like my content, be sure to support me on there too. I'm sure you all have your own thoughts, opinions, and criticisms on this one, so leave a comment in the comment section below. And just remember, I put myself in the mind of a college playoff ranker. These are not official by any means, and there won't be a college wrestling playoff at the end of the year, unfortunately, with the top 4 teams battling out. This was just for fun, so let's have some fun and really jump into this. So jumping right into the bottom 5 or 6 through 10, we have Cornell taking the 10th spot. Cornell sort of controls their own destiny, but earlier losses in the season and the weaker Ivy/EIWA schedule sort of hurts them. However, they do have Princeton this weekend, which could boost their chances, along with Wisconsin to wrap up their schedule, which would give them a serious boost. They did lose to Penn State early in their season, which would really not knock them back that far, but the real blemish on their season is their Lehigh loss, which is troubling because it would be considered an upset, and Lehigh is a 5-loss team, so that loss really weighs them down in these playoff rankings. Securing the 9th spot this week is Wisconsin, who only a few weeks ago would have been a top 4 team, but they took their first blemish on the year to Nebraska. Their best wins are of North Carolina in the ACC, and they beat Big Ten foe Rutgers, who was also undefeated at the time, so great win there honestly, but Rutgers has fallen off, now being a 4-loss team on the season. But Wisconsin also beat Minnesota earlier in the year, which is another 4-loss team, but they are still a scrappy dual team and a great win for these rankings. Wisconsin sort of controls their own destiny now. They will be facing Iowa here soon, and a win over the Hawkeyes could shoot them up in the rankings and knock Iowa out of the top 4 potentially, leaving room for them. And they also have to put down Big Red Cornell, which is another top 10 playoff team. Number 8 is Nebraska, who just reappeared in the rankings last week due to their win over undefeated Wisconsin. Nebraska was undefeated entering Big Ten play, but took some questionable losses to Purdue and Minnesota. They also control their own destiny with Michigan and Penn State duels set for this weekend, so they could either become a top 10 playoff team still, or drop out of the rankings completely. This is also a great time to sidebar, and to mention that I noticed in the college football rankings, regardless if you have lost to top tier opponents or have great wins on the year, it is seriously hard to make the top 4 playoffs with more than one loss, unfortunately. So I know Nebraska has more great wins than bad losses, and if they lose to Michigan and Penn State, maybe they should still be in the top 10, but 4 losses would be way too much to keep in the playoff rankings, just based off what I studied from how football does it. Number 7 is a sad story of the recent 2 falls for Oklahoma State. They would have easily been the second team in these rankings if they would have won this weekend, but instead they lost to unranked Northern Iowa on Saturday and then fell to a very good Iowa State on Sunday. Oklahoma State still has some great and super dominant wins over great teams so far this season, so they're still ranked here at 7, but those losses really hurt their chances to be in the top 4 playoff. Number 6 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. In my research of the college football playoff, I thought it was interesting that Ohio State was always in the top 8 and always in the running for the top 4 spots, no matter who they lost to or how weak their schedule was. Sorry, that was a joke, Buckeye fans. Alright, let's get serious again. But regardless, they only have 2 losses on the year to 2 very good opponents that are both ranked above them, so it's going to be hard for them to make movements. They have great wins, and since their losses are better than Oklahoma State's losses, they will remain above them for the time being. However, a win over Penn State this weekend would turn some heads, and it would maybe consider them for a top 4 spot, but they would also need some other luck too since they still have 2 losses. Now rounding off the top 5, with number 5, the only team looking from the outside, we have Iowa State. Iowa State I really wanted to put in the top 4, especially after their win over former number 3 Oklahoma State. However, based on their loss to Iowa, they really could not just jump right into the top 4. Essentially, they need one of the top 4 teams to take another loss, and they just need to keep winning at this point to control what they can control. Number 4 is the Wolverines from Michigan. Last week, they were outside looking in like Iowa State this week, after only winning 2 matches against Penn State. However, with some major movements in the top 4, Michigan slides in with a pretty nice resume and only losing to Penn State this season. They really control their own destiny, with the only playoff ranked team left on their schedule being Nebraska this weekend. Number 3 might get some head shakes, but just think like a college football playoff fan or something. But the number 3 team is North Carolina State. Their only loss came to the Iowa Hawkeyes, who have wins up and down this list if you haven't noticed. That match was super close, and NC State has been winning in dominant fashion ever since, which has proven to go a long way in the playoff rankings. On top of that, if they win the ACC, they are a shoo-in for the top 4. Their ranking above Michigan is simply because of their dominance, and I know their competition is a little weaker, but their loss did come early in the season, which also appears to make a huge difference in the CFP. Coming in at number 2 is the team I've been referencing throughout this list, and that is the Iowa Hawkeyes. They were easily the number 1 in previous weeks, but after their loss to Penn State, they only dropped to number 2. Normally after a loss like this, they would drop to 3 or 4. I mean, look at this year in football, for example, with Georgia and Alabama. But Iowa just had one of the best resumes in the country, honestly. They beat NC State, who is number 3 in these playoff rankings, and that's the reason NC State can't go any higher. They beat Iowa State, which is keeping them out of the playoff bubble, and they also beat number 6 Ohio State. However, Iowa does have a tough stretch to end their season, facing Wisconsin, who's a playoff ranked team, Oklahoma State, who was in the top 4 last week, and Nebraska, all to wrap up their schedule. But they did wrestle the number 1 team tough this past weekend, and speaking of that number 1 team, it is obviously the last undefeated team in the land, and that is Penn State. Penn State's win over Iowa easily put them here at the top spot, plus they're the last undefeated team in the nation. They beat the former ranked playoff team Arizona State at collegiate duels, they beat current ranked Cornell, along with beating down Michigan the week prior. They still have Nebraska and Ohio State to face, so they are not out of the woods yet, but it is looking very nice for them with 3 duels left in the season. Well, with all that said, everyone, this was just a quick little fun video that I wanted to make, and it was honestly a blast going through this and thinking like a college football playoff ranker. It would be awesome to see this college wrestling playoff actually happen, but I don't think it will ever happen in any of our lifetimes. For now, we can have fun just speculating and talking in this alternate universe, I guess. If you liked this video, or if I missed to talk about any of your teams and your top 10 playoff rankings, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section below. Also, if you have any questions on my rankings, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll try to get to it. I want to answer as many questions as possible, unlike the real college football playoff rankers. Also, like I mentioned earlier in the video, if you guys want quick little videos on these hypothetical rankings, please let me know and I will be sure to make them. But I can also just do a Twitter post that you can all check out. Whichever works best for you guys, I'm down to do. Now, with all that said, I wish you all a great day and take care, everybody.